Hello, everyone, and welcome to Track 2 Week 1. My name is Chris Lukes, and with us today we have Kay, and we also have Trish. Hi, Trish.
Hi.
So we'll go ahead and get started. So first of all, welcome to the Metagame Book Club, and we're going to be running until December 4th. Also, thank you to Games and Simulations Network, all of the attendee members that are attending, as well as thank you for the officers that are helping out. Also, as well, the Neville instructors portion of a Neville Trail. Thank you for your help with the presentations, as well as some virtual world and commentary. Basically, really what we're doing in this track is we're really focusing on the game design element. So these are sort of the big 5 focuses of the Games and Simulations Network. Games, game-based learning, game design, game studies, and gamification. As you are now attending a live session, today this session is for the book You and the Art of Games. So the Hangouts will happen on Saturday at 9 a.m. Eastern. So it's a little earlier than normal, but that's okay, I think, for everyone. And as always, for our setup is talking to everyone about how to go ahead and get started. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure you join the Metagame Google Plus community so that we can go ahead and have access to all the discussions and posts that are there. Make sure you post your intro, and we will respond to you. Go ahead and also go to the Google site, which Kay is showing on her screen right now. And that will go ahead and that will basically get you set up as far as what the readings are each week, as well as is also where we post the discussions on Wednesdays. So for week 1, you should have read, or you should be reading, in the process of reading, pages 1 through 128 for You by Austin Grossman. Also, for the Art of Game Design, the lenses we asked everyone to read was lenses 1 through 18. This is pages 1 through 113. So just shows books kind of interesting. So Trish, you showed off your brand new book. So you liking the book so far?
For a textbook, it's not a dry read. It's pretty interesting, and he manages to move through his topics, and he breaks them up into small chunks, so you don't feel like you're being overwhelmed by a bunch of information all at once. I think that's the best thing I've liked about it so far.
Cool. So also you can also go through the app as well. So those of you that didn't have the book, you can also go ahead and use the mobile app until you want to grab the book. Really the big difference between the mobile app and the book is that the book gives you a few more lenses if you're buying the second edition. So that's the difference between the first edition and the second edition. So a lot of this is a book club. We'll be having discussions. So in addition to these live discussions that we have once a week, the other thing that happens is we also have discussions that go on the Google Plus community, which is one of the reasons why we asked everyone to go ahead and join there. So you can go ahead and you can grab the questions that are there. And as you saw in week 1, and week 2 we'll also go ahead and post those questions on the page as well, in the Metagame Book Club, as well as in the community. So just a reiteration, just because we know it's the first week, and everyone can go ahead and get some stuff done, is make sure you join the community, make sure you say hello to everyone, and talk a little bit about yourself. There are some intro questions for you to fill out, and so also go ahead and check on the website. So now we're going to go ahead and jump into You by Austin Grossman. So the main characters you sort of start seeing now is Darren. So Darren is really sort of the current CEO, this guy who's in charge when you open up the book. When you first start out, there's Darren. You're introduced really quickly to Darren and Simon, and these are the two founders, 2 of the 3 founders. Lisa is the other, and then Dawn as well, that went ahead and founded Black Art Studio. So what you see is that Simon was really sort of the coder guy. He was the guy who developed the waffle. Woohoo! Interesting name for a game engine, but it actually kind of fits in with game engine names. And then the book opens up with some weird way he died, and they never really ever go into it. And I think it's one of the things that if you read some of the comments about the book, it's one of the things that a lot of people are complain about the book is that the author really doesn't give you all the details. You just sort of get little bits and pieces of what's going on. So Simon unfortunately has died, and then Darren, Dawn, and Lisa are left to carry on in Black Arts, and really the story follows Russell. And Russell was part of Darren, Simon, Lisa, and Dawn. The group there in high school, and then in grade school and high school, and then he sort of like wandered away, and then he came back, and he came back and was interviewing for a job. Pretty much that's your opening scene. And the other character you spend a lot of time with, like I said, so is Don. So Don's there. Don's the office manager. So he's sort of the business guy. He's working on keeping the business up and running, especially after Darren takes off and forms his own company, which actually is not uncommon for gaming companies or for any technology companies where CEOs will go ahead and start on other companies or move on. Lisa's there. She is sort of the Wonderkin, the Warrior Code princess that's there, and so she's doing a lot of the development of a lot of the software the company uses, as well as handling a lot of the programming pieces. What's interesting about Matt is Matt really is the sort of the lore keeper. He's the archive of Black Arts. He really knows everything that was ever published about the game. But he was not an original founder, so he was not part of that initial group. He's much younger, but he's someone who's really sort of been a fanboy of all the Black Art games. For those that have watched the BlizzCon or are familiar with World of Warcraft, he's Redshirt guy. He's the guy who goes in and he asks about the canon, and he keeps the game developers honest. And most likely that's where Matt came from, as they met him at a convention. They really impressed with his knowledge base and his passion for the community, and he was brought in to sort of be that person that protects the canon, that protects the lore, and keeps consistency with all the games. And especially when they're jumping all around, because as I told you, some of their games they're going into the future, they're going back in time. We start doing all those wonderful loops on all the World of Warcraft players can relate. You start getting into some issues with the lore whenever you start seeing these problems. So one of the things that Matt does, and Matt is a really central character, is because he's giving that feedback and he's making sure people are consistent. And you see a lot of the other players, especially Russell, coming to Matt and asking him questions about, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? So the games themselves, what you have is Realms, which is the original game, and Building in the Third Age is really sort of where this story starts taking off, is that Darren comes back from being away, and then all of a sudden they do the big announcement, hey, this is what we're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and look at the Third Age. You get also spend a lot of time in Solar Empires, which was their newest game. But everyone is really tired of space by the time that Russell gets there. As Toby says, he's tired of black. And so this is one of those interesting things that you see there in the storylines. You get to see sort of a peer behind the curtain. I think that's one of the good things about the book, is it sort of gives you a sort of an overview from a design perspective of really sort of what people are looking for and what people are also getting tired of, because that's really very realistic. Is if you're working on the same project over and over again, eventually you get tired of it. One of the things that we gave you a link to was this website right here, Black Art Games. This was developed for the novel, and it gives you a chance to sort of look at sort of the graphics level of what's here. Remember, this is set in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and that really this is sort of the early 80s, late 90s. So we haven't really we just started hitting higher end graphics card in the late 90s. Really, sort of that has taken off since then, obviously. But you can see here they have some of the original artwork that they came up with for their story, and that what you're seeing here. So Realms of Gold, you're seeing there's Clandestine, you're seeing Solar Empires, and you're seeing Realms Beyond. And so what's happening is, what happens with the book is it goes through this big catalog of Black Arts, and it's one of those things that you see a lot in games, is that they really start looking at the commercialization aspect, where they go ahead and they are basically sort of living off the glories of the past, and that's sort of where you come in with Black Arts. Is that they're sort of, they've gotten their awards in the past, they've moved into a bigger headquarters. Russell shows up sort of after everyone has just finished shipping off the latest installment of Solar Empires, so there's not a whole lot of people there. It's very very desolate, very empty. He describes it as a very dark place. You really sort of get a feel for sort of just that there's not a whole lot of people around, and then all of a sudden they go ahead and start coming back to life. So as Darren shows up, then basically they start ramping up. They get told about a new game. Things start happening. They start getting full staffed, and then what happens?
Darren quits.
Yes, exactly. Darren quits. So he goes ahead and quits, and so basically they're sort of back to square one. So they have to restaff up. They have to really look at it. Russell really gets pushed into more of a leadership realm, where he sort of is now looked at as the game designer, as really sort of the storyteller. He's the one that has to come up with designing the game and what the game's actually going to look like. So one of the really cool things about the book that the book does is it goes ahead and it shows you the various different aspects of game design. So it really sort of gives you a good difference between what is a game developer, what is a game designer. And so with a game developer, that's the individuals who do the coding. So when you hear someone's a game developer, that means they're doing a lot of the back-end coding. So they're working a lot with a computer, they're writing lines of code, whereas the designer is basically looking at what does the actual aesthetics of the game look like? What type of genre of the game is it? What type of what should the loot look like? What should the actual environment feel like? So they're the ones, and what is the storyline and the narrative? And so that's what you see as well. So you see a lot of pieces here that really sort of lays out the different jobs, the different aspects that you see in a game company, where you're seeing that there's the game designers, there's the graphics programmers. So you learn a lot about polygons early on, the first couple of chapters as Russell's playing around. You learn about what everyone's favorite frame rate is. It's 31. That means you have the most flashy icons and the most cool polygons that you can possibly cram in your your graphics card can run, and you're still maintaining a frame rate that's above, that doesn't make it the play really herky jerky. And as every gamer will tell you, the worst thing you can see is when your FPS drops, and so your frames per second.
Yep.
And so like I said, the really nice thing about this book is it really gives you a good aspect of how do games create the environments that you see, because everything's based on polygons. Everything you see in there, everything you see in World of Warcraft, everything you see in any console game, everything you see pretty much in everything, even your mobile games, are polygons. And these is sort of the back wireframe piece of everything, where you will see just sort of how things are framed together. Also, the other thing, the game does spend a good time going over the game editor, and in a lot of shops, the game editor is homemade. It is something they did themselves. It really is their little their secret sauce, as the book states it, for their game, is that the game editor always has limitations to it. The game editor always has things it does well, and as you read, whenever you heard Russell get his quick tour of the game engine by Lisa, is that some users are just expert users and they keep click, and Russell just learns to go, oh yes, I really realize now I need to fake it until I know it. And then Russell goes, no, I just basically decided that I'm no longer going to try to hide that. I'm just going to let people know how dumb I am. And so it was interesting to see his evolution and sort of him getting rid of, dropping some of that sort of being too self-conscious, and then just sort of going ahead and really focusing on the jobs that he has. So the other thing it introduces is toys and pets. So toys and pets are really a key portion of every game. These are vanity items, so also other pieces that are there are different things that people have. So these different aesthetic values, vanity items, that are out there. So Trish, what are some of your favorite toys and pets from your favorite games?
Well, the first thing that popped in my mind is when my daughter spent um, 30, $40 for a hat in Team Fortress 2. That's a big vanity item
Yeah.
right there, is the hats in Team Fortress 2. But I would have to say I really like the pets. The latest one I found in World of Warcraft was a little Murloc, but I didn't get the fancy Murloc that you guys got that attended BlizzCon. But it's a cute little Murloc. And then there's always, you get excited about some of the toys because
Mhm.
they can change the way you look for
Yes.
an hour or so. So when I finally got the toy that transformed me into looking like Talon Priest Ashal, which is a bird type creature, that was a pretty happy day.
So, Kay, what are some of your favorite toys and pets that you have in the games that you play?
I guess I am not. I will take any pet that can kind of be my companion, that can come along for me a while. I seem to develop almost like a relationship with it. Whether you can bring along a wolf or something else. I'm not one of the people who do any kind of, say, active seeking for pets. I won't spend an hour or two in a game looking for a pet, but once I have it, despite the fact that it's just something digital, I kind of I kind of like that. It'll go ahead and follow along.
Yeah, it is. I mean, sorry, I get a little bit of echo. So one of the things that you see a little bit is that everyone has their own favorite toy or pet or vanity item. For me, I like the different mounts that are there. I also in like World of Warcraft, I play a larger race called a Tauren, and so I like the fact that they scale up all the mounts with that. I know it's going away in the next expansion, but oh well, I still like having the big mounts. But it's kind of interesting to see the different things that are there, and the other really cool thing I like to see in games is the changing in perspectives, because a lot of the games you play different races, and different races have different sizes. So there's always the big burly race, there's always a little tiny race, and so it's interesting to play varying sizes of races to sort of get a feel for the scale. And that's one of the things I really do like about some of the descriptions they're talking about here as Russell is staying, is building things. I mean, what's really interesting is how the part of the story, I believe it's like in chapter 6 or 7, where basically Russell starts building his underground lair with the game editor, and he basically starts off at 10 in the morning, and then he starts building, and then at the he goes on about all the grandeur he has, and then he sort of like realizes that his face is like inches from the screen. He's hunched over. He's been sitting there for hours, and it's now 4:30 in the morning, and he just lost all track of time as he was building, and it's something that I think a lot of our gamers, sorry, our gamers go ahead and get engaged in. So a lot of builders just get absorbed in that building process. So some people get involved in the questing side. Some people get involved in following storylines and really sort of keeping track of all the lore that happens in a game. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people do the questing. But you're also seeing a lot of people go into the building side of things, and they spend a long time creating. And I think it's one of the reasons why a game like Minecraft is really so popular right now, is that people get to lose themselves in building a lot of different things. Because from what I've seen, a lot of people spend. Yes, they play PvP. Yes, they play survival mode. But I think a lot of the students, our students and the players of Minecraft, spend a lot of time building things and then sharing their builds. So Trish, what do you think? Do you think that building aspect is something that you see in a lot of your students? Is that their focus is really sort of that building end, or are you seeing that they're spending equal amounts of times in each part?
The thing is that I very rarely let my students play in survival mode, simply because I'm in an elementary school, and when you play in survival mode, if you die because a creeper's blown up on you or whatever, you lose all your inventory. And I've discovered that if I allow the students to play in survival mode, younger students who may not have the skill built up to really survive well, they can get very frustrated and upset. And
that doesn't just happen to little players, by the way.
yeah, because they lose all their inventory, and that is not my goal right now. My goal is to keep getting the students to produce artifacts that their teachers can see the value in as demonstrations of mastery. And so, yes, though, they do get tied up in the build. They're working, I've got fourth graders working on a project right now that every week I have to say, you have to get done, you have to get done, but they get in there and they start building and they get completely lost, and they're just like building and going, oh, just let me fix this one little thing, and that one little thing leads to another little thing and another little thing and another little thing, till they've spent the entire time still building. So yes, it is very easy for them to get lost in Minecraft in the building. Yes.
Well, and that's the interesting thing about that sandbox genre, where really it does allow people to really express their creative side. That's there. And so the other piece of the book goes in a lot in, is the bug. So the bug list. The bug list is really sort of what you see in all of in a lot of different places in programming, in coding, is that you see that there is a bug list. And this is simply the things that happen, things that go wrong, and things that either whether it's a result of bad code, conflicting code. It could just be the user is doing a different command than what the programmers first intended. You get to learn about alpha testing and beta testing. So these are things that you're seeing in the game design component, where you're playing around with it. I mean, you see things that Russell is going around and playing around with, like the one guard that's half embedded in the wall. We see a lot of that for those that play games. You see incorrect pathing. You see different issues that pop up from time to time. And so, Kay, you had an interesting observation when it came to the bug list about what you found interesting as far as some of the language they use. I know we're going to go over some bad vocabulary later, but just sort of give your overview of your class.
Okay, well, actually, I was going to save it till later, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. Considering I have a bunch of slides on it, I will save it till later.
No worries. So what is the bug? So the big bug that Russell is really spends a lot of time in these chapters tracking down is what's known as the Mournblade. So it's the black blade. It really sort of pops up as all of a sudden things that shouldn't be able to be killed, these immortal characters or these God mode characters that really should not be able to be killed, are all of a sudden being killed. And he's like, well, why is that? What's going on? And it really serves as the hook that leads Russell down the rabbit hole. And so that's really sort of where we're going for the rest, sort of a good portion of the rest of the book will be focused on giving us a tour of the past, talking about the past. And that's one of the things that this book does a really good job of bouncing back and forth. It's not necessarily a linear storyline. You really sort of have a lot of parallels where basically you're seeing a lot of the current and the present in Russell's life, and then they're jumping back in flashbacks to Gamer Camp, jumping back to a lot of other places that they have been as a team, as a group, and as his life experiences. So really sort of where we sort of wrap up these pages is, I found it really interesting. I decided to copy from the book, and these are sort of some of the passages that you see in the book. The place is in Doria. Time, end of the Third Age. It's a fantasy role-playing game, and it's the Hyperborean Crown. So it was really hilarious to read the brainstorming session where they try to come up with names of the game. And they went through the back and forth of the fictional characters as they basically tease each other on their way to trying to figure out a name for the game. And this happens a lot as you try to basically do a brainstorming session. You try to throw stuff to the wall and see what sticks, and to figure out what game do you want to call it. But this looks like it's going to be the last installment, maybe. But again, as Russell pointed out, and as you see as Russell plays all the different games, you see how the games have come out, and then they've made spin-offs of games, basically the Mario Kart version of their game, and then they came back to the original storyline. So you see that a lot in games where they sort of keep going on and trying to keep extending the titles. I'll turn over to Kay.
You're muted.
Okay, one thing I want to say before we jump to anything else was Chapter 8, and I just made a quick copy of this, and basically where it says the 4 heroes, and it does mention Jung, and yes, this is totally Jung. This is the archetype. And gamers seem to do it more than anybody else. And we've explored this before in the Metagame Book Club with Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, and how every game we seem to look at seems to be a bit, is sword and board and has these prototypes. Well, it's the same thing in this book. And what I really like about this book, even, it's a piece of fiction, but the person who wrote it does design games. And is also a writer and a novelist. But there's a lot of it, there's a lot of authenticity infused in this. And one of the things that is infused in this is the fact that you see in a lot of Western games the same themes coming over and over again, and we just assume that it's part of our the collective psychology of it, and that it's Jungian, and it doesn't have to be. And Sherry Jones has gotten us discussing this before, but the biggest thing I wanted to point out was here's another example of it seems that the same archetypes are showing up again. Now, to go over some of the other things, let's go over some of the acronyms you see. RTM, you see this in the book a lot, and this is release to manufacturer. So that means when the game is ready enough to go public. And since we're gamers, and since we use technology all the time in the classroom, and we are constantly trying out different technologies, we see this. We see this a lot, and we see a lot of things that we don't think should be released to the manufacturer. For example, our learning management systems. It takes us about a week to start finding the bugs. And when you try reporting them, you get to hear, well, that's a known issue. And it's definitely not our favorite thing. But that's part of the authenticity that I kind of like about this novel, is you're starting to hear the discussion about people saying that oh, this is something that we're not necessarily going to fix. This is something that we're not necessarily going to spend any more work on. And if you've ever seen an LMS, and if you talk to your LMS coordinator and ask them to give you a list of known issues, it's usually depending on how new something is, there'll be like 50 known issues or 100 known issues, and you just keep thinking about, why haven't you fixed this? And then you hear about, oh, well, it'll be fixed in the next release, or there'll be a hot fix in a couple weeks or a month or something like that. And you can really, and Chris just typed in, and then the favorite phrase, here's the workaround. Yes, there are a lot of people who work with LMSs or work in IT for schools whose job it is, and have job security, because whatever was bought is going to have these problems, and they are almost going to be fatal flaws, and it's their job to find the workaround. So how many extra clicks do you have to do? Oh, do you use this? Make sure you're using this browser and not this browser. And it can be something as simple, what do you mean you can't use Safari? 25% of the relationships uses Safari, but suddenly I can't use it for this, and we have to tell our students to use this. So some of the other things I wanted to point out is really early in the book, they do get into, look, there are 3 areas. And again, this is a reason why I like the book, because we as educators can start learning about this. We have students who love to play games. We have students who love to make games. And we got to get past the kindergarten finger painting, you know, free range, let the children do whatever they want, and actually start thinking about what they're doing and seeing if we can actually, oh, I don't know, even help guide the students. We have to give more than lip service to, oh, system thinking and system design. We have to start talking to people about what our students can do, because we have our students coming up, and and Chris, if you'd like to say something, I can hand it over to you. Do you want to say something? Okay, then go back to the other slide. Okay, so hold on.
No, actually it was. Yeah, I mean, I agree. One of the early things I like about the book is exactly what Kate pointed out. I think it's actually a really good thing that you can see for a lot of our students that want to go into game design, because it's one of the things that's one of the areas I see is computer science, and one of the things that I find with a lot of my students is that yes, they are. People come and say, well, I want to design games. It's like, okay, well, or I want to get into game development, or I want to develop games. It's like, well, do you really want to develop games, or do you want to be part of these other options that are there? Mm-hmm. So that way you can go ahead and grab the different pieces that are out there. So you look at, okay, do you want to be a programmer? Do you actually want to build the code? Do you actually want to go ahead and do that? Do you want to be a designer, where you're talking about the narrative and the storyline, and you're really focused on giving that gamer that really solid, solid storyline to bite into and really sort of explore? That's one of the things that I know Kay really likes, is looking at that narrative piece and really getting engaged in that. Or are you looking at the gorgeous design? Do you want to create gorgeous worlds? Do you want to make lifelike trees? Do you want to make that troll look better or meaner or nastier or whatever? Do you want to make that sword more oversized? Because everyone loves having the little tiny character with carrying around a weapon that's 3 times its size. So I mean, there's different things you can go ahead and play around with in gaming. And so unfortunately, a lot of individuals when they're first starting out, they really don't know that all these other different career fields exist, and they don't necessarily realize that there's all these different majors that actually can tie back in to the design realm. I mean, after all, look at Russell. Russell's an English major, and then he went to become a lawyer, along with a bunch of other things that he tried that before he came back to gaming.
And that's what I really like about the book. I like the fact that the book gets it right and gets it out there in front. What it does is it lets you know that you have your choices of programming, art, and design. And it gives you an idea of what these different things are. You get to know that what Lisa really likes doing is, Lisa's a math person. She really likes figuring out how to do the programming and how to get the game to do something. I mean, we find out massacring is like one of her favorite things. Mm. But what she really likes to do. What she really likes to do is she likes to go ahead and she likes to figure out what the action is, what's going to happen there. Okay? We also have other examples from people who do the graphics and who do the art. I mean, Russell makes the comment that they go to art school and they come back and they have this wonderful sense of fashion once they come back. But actually making the artwork, that is very different than, say, what Lisa does. Okay? And then you have Matt and Russell, who are in the middle of it. And Matt and Russell, Matt started out as a play tester, and his job is to go in there and find the problems. They see if the problems are repeatable, and then put them on a list. And then the next thing that you have is you have Russell, and he's somewhere in between. Okay, so the graphics are there, the forms are there, but the canvas is empty. And what he has to do is he has to take what's there graphically and then go ahead and put it on the world.
I'm thinking of, and when you're talking about, it reminds me of a scene in the book where he goes to Lisa and he says, I want such and such to do this. And she says, we can't do that. And he said, well, what about if we do this? And she goes, nope. And it's then she tells him what mathematically she can do and how she can make the game do that and the programming do that. So it really kind of let me know that it's not like they just sit there and say, well, we're going to make this happen, and then it happens. It's got to go through the logic of the mathematics before it gets into the game.
Oh yeah, it's not magic.
Well, I like to think it's magic.
and I mean that's the thing about it is as teachers we can encourage our students to do all of it. It's great if we have a concept of where to put them, and also ideas of, well, you know what, if we're going to put these into groups, we can start thinking about, even in Minecraft, who's going to, what student's going to do what. I mean, the students right now are dividing themselves up into things, but perhaps we can go ahead and do a little bit of guiding also. And like I said, this is why I like this book. I mean, we finished with Ready Player One, which was a great thing back to the nostalgia of the 80s. And then this book gives us some of the 90s nostalgia, which I'm loving also. But it's also having us learn more about, so what was the development of games in the U.S. and Canada? What was the development in North America? What were these startups like? Who did these startups? What did they have to first start with? I mean, there's a wonderful part of it in the scene in the first coding class where Darren figures out just how to move from block to block, and it looks like nothing, but it actually means everything, because without that, this whole game could not have happened. You also get to hear about, well, how did everybody get first? And this is something that's even showing with us with us as educators. Dungeons and Dragons, the books, the dice, and the miniatures. This is where we first learn about games. We learn mythology. This is where all the Jungian archetypes came in from. And it's interesting, because even if you're thinking about this, and you're thinking about this at an elementary school level, or a middle school level, or a high school level, is there a way for you to introduce maybe a different culture that doesn't follow a Western or a Jungian field for your students, to get them to start thinking about that? What if you had them build something in Minecraft that was based maybe on Chinese myths, right? Or maybe it could be Russian, or maybe it could be some culture that isn't what they see in everything else that's popular culture. How can you get them thinking like this, so that they could take maybe more of a world or a global view? So that part of it is, I think, is interesting if we start examining this, rather than just taking the finger painting model. If we start thinking about, well, what literature do we want to introduce our students to, or folklore, or parts of the world, or if they're going to do something on Minecraft. The American Revolution is great, but if you have some extra time, maybe have them look at, some of the folklore of Indonesia, or Australian Aboriginal or Native American, and think about what can go on for that. I think of a Native American village might look different than the typical the typical American Revolutionary village. And Chris, if you go next. Okay, so some of the now a great scene, and I will say that there's certain flaws with this book. The book isn't exactly Ready Player One, but this one is they introduce you to Darren, or I should say present day Darren, in a very interesting way. He comes in, he's back from Nepal, and he doesn't say a lot, okay, but he says, we're going to do a new game. And immediately you get the project management part of it coming in. And Matt and Don then come to the forefront. And basically Matt comes up to the board, to a whiteboard, which they happen to have a whiteboard, and he writes the 3 words, programming, design, and art, and then 6 more things. He writes pre-production, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3, beta, and RTM. And if we are truly teaching our students systems design, and we are saying that they are learning from games, systemic and systematic, then I want to hear about this too. And I know that there's some people like Chris who are teaching with epistemic frames. And this kind of epistemic frame, having your students do this, and Trish, I'm not talking about your students necessarily, but if you're having high school students and this is a full class, why not? Why not? And go ahead, Chris, to the next slide. Why not go ahead and put it up on the board and have them actually think about how do you time management? How do you divide this out? How do you decide how much gets put into each of these cycles? I mean, pre-production. How long are the students going to spend on this? I mean, are you going to dictate this, or is this something that you have your students do? What does alpha 1, 2, and 3 look like? What do you have to have done by these? And then the beta testing, and then ready to manufacture, or ready to play. So when it comes to these, if we are truly going to say that we're using systems design and they're learning systems design, then we do have to go ahead and set the frame. Next slide, Chris. Okay, nice one. Did everybody love hearing about DNF? Do not fix. Okay. Think about going over this concept with your students. What is worth fixing? What is not worth fixing? And what do you just move on from? Think about this as kind of the life lesson for our students. A lot of time we say everything has to be absolutely perfect. And if it's writing an essay, I can see that. But if it's a project, we do have to teach them, at what point do you move on? Okay, NR, no repo. Okay, so meaning no reproduction. I can tell you, working with an LMS, we get this a lot. One person sees it and we automatically, on the team I'm on, we send out an email. Is anyone else getting this? Can anybody else reproduce it? Can you take a screenshot? Can you trace this back? Can you take a look at the code that's happening? I will tell you, in educational technology, if your students are going into IT, if they're going into a lot of fields, being able to spot that bug, reproduce it, and document it, it means something. It is part of a daily occurrence. Okay, so that's about all I had when it came to the game design. But I really like this part of the book, and I think that gave it really gave educators a taste of what it is, and that they can actually talk to their students about this. Now, you shouldn't just read the book. I mean, if you're going to talk to your students about it, go ahead and look for some blogs. Go ahead and look for some articles that might tell this in a little more detail. Bring a game designer into your class, even if it's through Hangout. And I know, Trish, you do this all the time. I was even on one of those Hangouts with Haikitsu. But what do you think your students learn when you go ahead and do a Hangout or a Skype with the development team of an app or a game?
They get really excited, and as we've been talking about this, particularly the three different aspects, I'm thinking of seeing my students this week working on a web app called The Foos, where they are designing games, but they're actually coding them. And it's a way that you do the game within there, and it brings out different things in different students, because some kids are really into making the puzzle as complicated as they possibly can and trying to stump everybody that way. Others are looking at how they do it, the prettiness of it, and others are just plodding ahead. So you do see kids breaking down into those individual little groups that you were talking about. And 9 out of 10 kids in elementary school, if you ask them what they want to do, they're going to tell you, I want to design video games, because that's that, you know, where 20 or 30 years ago they want to be a movie star or sing in a rock and roll band. Now they all want to design video games because that is their main form of entertainment. That is their consumable. So it's what they do. And so they all want to do that. And that's one of the reasons I do the things that I do, because I try to imbue them with a sense of love of the aspects of design and the coding part before they get somewhere and somebody sucks the joy out of it. So I just try to keep them knowing that this stuff can be fun as long as you're passionate about it.
And that goes really well into our first discussion question. Now, this discussion question was also the first, is the first sentence of the book, which is, so what is your ultimate game? So I'll reserve my answer, but Trish or Chris, do one of you guys want to go first? The way the question went to Russell was, and it was their ending interview question. So it doesn't matter what the budget, it doesn't matter what the constraints are. What is your ultimate game? Anybody want to take that one?
I'll go first. When I started thinking about this question, I immediately went to World of Warcraft, because of the fact that I've played Skyrim, I've played Half-Life, I've played Minecraft, I've played a lot of different games, but World of Warcraft is the game that I really love because of the story. I love the story, and I love being able to go out and read the books and learn the lore, and I like the fact that I have choices within the game. If I just want a quest, I can run around all over the place and just complete quests. If I'm feeling particularly tough, I start trying to head into higher level raids or dungeons to see if I can keep everybody alive, because I'm a healer. And if I'm really feeling like I want to dust it up, I'll go into PvP, but I have choices, and those choices are never constrained, because you're constantly moving forward. And so to me, that is the ultimate game, of having choices, having a rich storyline, having the ability to craft things or not craft things. It's just being able to have all those options open to you, and the fact that it is a pervasive universe and that it's always changing, and you can go back in time, you can go forward in time. It's always going on. It never ends. That's one of the things that I'm always talking to my daughters about, particularly the one who likes to play Dragon Age and Fallout, is that the game ends. And when the game ends, I'm kind of going, well, that's depressing. What do you do now? It's over. You go back and play it again. To me, that's just, to me, I just don't understand that. And so that ultimate of it keeps on going and keeps on going and keeps on going. And I recently just leveled a tune in World of Warcraft to 100. And I went to areas I'd never been before while I was leveling her up. I've been playing the game for 8 years or more, and I had never been to some of these places. So there's always places and things that I haven't done. That's how huge the universe is. So yeah, I would say it would have to be a game like World of Warcraft.
And that's really interesting, because think about, say, when we were growing up, about, you know, you'd read a book or a series of books and you wouldn't want it to end, but so what? But you had no choice, right?
Right. Right.
And it's interesting that aspect is your aspect of an ultimate game. So Chris, what about you?
Sure. Sorry, sure. For me, what's interesting is I think my ultimate game would probably be something along the lines of what Russell got to experiment with, the game editor. I think it'd be really awesome if there's a game system out there where you could actually easily design your own game, drag and dropping your environment, setting things up. You could also download other people's games that they've created and then play it. I think that a lot of people would like that type of game where you have a lot of preloaded assets and you can sort of go ahead and you already have the game engine and the mechanics. And that really sort of what Russell was saying is that you would right click on you drop your monster down, you'd right click on it to set its behavior or attitude, and then you would go ahead and be able to share your worlds with other people, set the loot, different things like that. I think that actually would be kind of fun.
Okay, so now I'm going to say, Chris, there is Roblox, but I guess you're saying Roblox isn't as immersive as you'd like it to be. You know, there's also things like Game Salad out there, which I'm again guessing that you're saying that it's not quite easy enough there. So are you thinking like not so much like discrete games, but a pervasive world? And if you remember, Rafe Coaster about 6 years back had like MetaPlace. Or are you thinking something that's similar to Second Life, or you know, some people would say, well, Minecraft. Yeah, that you can do that in Minecraft. So what do you think there? What are you looking for that these things don't necessarily fit?
Yeah, I think for me it's something that isn't quite necessarily out there. I mean, probably the closest thing that's out there is Metagame. But I think for me what it is it actually would be having an inventory, being able to design your own landscape, which you can do in a lot of other games. But basically you have the standard library of mobs and bosses and things like that have already been created. You already have loot that either you can create your own loot or it's already been created. You can assign different drops. So basically you have exactly what they had there at Black Hearts, where you basically have your own sort of game studio, game editor. And no, you don't necessarily have to go ahead and use the code, because there are games like Game Salad, but the Game Salad you still have to import a bunch of media. What I'm saying is that literally it's just you have a library. You open up a library, you drag and drop, boom, done. You don't necessarily have to go out and find or create your own digital assets for the game, but it's already there. And so you can also change the effect. You can also change the gravity, lighting. There's a lot of different aspects of other pieces that are out there. So yes, Minecraft gives you some of that. Second Life gives you some of that. Game Salad gives you some of that. But really, what it is it's something that it would already all be there. So all you got to do is plug and play, and then you're gone. And that, yes, there would be some barriers. You'd have to figure out some things. But the thing is that's also part of the fun of building your own game, as well as playing some other games. Steam has a lot of new content and stuff like that. But for me, it would just be something that lets you go ahead and really makes it an easily accessible game editor, where the game engine's already created, everything's already created. The average user doesn't have the coding skill necessarily that's out there, but it does give them the ability to go ahead and design the game and play around with things.
Okay, I guess it'll be my turn for the ultimate game. I don't know the ultimate game right now. I know that there's like one that I have to complete, and it's basically because I started with an instructor, and then the instructor decided it couldn't be done, and that was that's the Egyptian Book of Gates. It's basically a book of the dead, and I want to figure out how to do that in some form. The other thing, and I keep saying this when I'm around math or history people, I would love to do something, and it's not necessarily based on the book, but maybe the concept, like the history of zero and also the history of math. I would love to design a game that could show how we develop the math that we currently have. And what I mean by that, come on, starting everywhere from when we didn't have zeros to all the different mathematical formulas that happened along the way. I would love to do a game, develop a game, the images and everything else that made that interesting.
All right, question 2. How would you turn Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy, into a video game? Also, if you're not a Jane Austen fan, feel free to pick another novel or educational concept. So let's see. So Trish, you want to start us off?
When I read this one, I just kind of I started picturing the book in my head, and I started going, okay. She rode a horse, and when I think of video games, when I think of most video games, I think in terms of action, of things that people are doing, and a lot of Pride and Prejudice to me was Elizabeth Bennet riding off to rescue the sisters because they had gotten themselves into situations, and she's having to retrieve them from lives of ill repute, or the sister who gets sick because she's out riding around on the moors or whatever. And I in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, would that be a choice kind of thing, as in an interactive fiction thing, where
that's what I was thinking too.
where you would turn it into, you could change the path of how Pride and Prejudice plays out by the choices Elizabeth Bennet makes regarding her sisters, or you could play one of her sisters and you could change it that way. I really, the only way I could see it being a video game was as interactive fiction, because I just don't know how much excitement and adrenaline rush you can get from walking across the moor. Or, because I just remember her dress getting muddy from walking to the other house. That was the biggest one that I could figure out. But if you're going to go add in the zombie aspect, it just turns it to another level.
And I just and yeah, that's a great. I thought, even when I read this in the book, I immediately thought interactive fiction, and I thought it because of all the constraints there are.
Mm-hmm.
And also that, it kind of does have a fairy tale ending, that, oh, Mr. Darcy just happened to say, decide to save everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I would like it as interactive fiction, and I hate to say it, I would like it to be playable so that, the family could totally fail. I mean, Mr. Wickham, doesn't marry the sister. Mr. Darcy doesn't intervene. And I guess for me, I would like it as interactive fiction, because if you were to do it in school, the students would be able to get into a much bigger discussion.
Yes.
And I think Chris wants to say something.
Sure. The thing I thought of when I saw this question and we came up with this question was that Well, I would probably turn it into like a Magic 8 Ball type game where basically you have different AI for the different characters. And so you pick the different characters and then you ask them a question. And then they would basically answer you in Jane Austen style. So our next question. Well, actually, we have some lenses. So back to Kate.
Okay, Chris, I think you're gonna have to refresh because I'm currently not seeing that coming up. Let's see. Okay, so now we'll get into we're reading Jesse Schell's The Art of Game Design, and like Trish said, it is being used as a textbook, and I think it was written as a textbook. Quite honestly, to me, parts of it seem like it's written quite similar to like the Dummy's Guide to Art of Game Design. We do get some obvious stuff. We do a lot of the commentary is similar to what you might read in one of the Dummy's Guide. You know, very chatty tone with a lot of the idea. You know, with a lot of the author's ideas put in there. And it's also written in a way that you can go ahead and get a feel that you can do it as a beginner. In fact, in the beginning of the book, he's even saying, "Go ahead, say it. I am a game designer," and that's why it reminded me, as the guide for dummies. But I mean, it is also encouraging for people who haven't tried to design a game before. And it just says, go ahead and do it. Now, he does revolve it a lot around these lenses. And we put down to look at the first 18 of them. I will say for next week, we are going to go back to 15. We're going to go back and start at 15. But here are some of them. And I'm an instructional designer, so having this kind of framework to think about anything that you're going to design, whether it be a student event or if you're thinking about a semester, it's useful. These kind of decks are you don't have to follow every single thing, but they're useful for thinking and brainstorming. Okay, so a couple of these are emotion, essential experience, deciding on the venue, where are you going to put the element of surprise, what's fun, where are you going to add the curiosity, what's the endogenous value, problem solving, and then the elemental trait. And if you go to the next one, Chris. Okay, the holographic design, the unification, the resonance, the infinite inspiration, the problem statement, and we're going to go back next week to 15 because you can talk a lot more about the 8 filters. But this is the one we really want you to focus on this week. And you can go ahead and put it up in the Google Plus community, totally fine. But this is the one that you can really take into a classroom. The lens of essential experience. I can also see in student life people going ahead and being able to do this. But if you think about this, is to use a lens, stop thinking about your game and start thinking about the experience of the player. Ask yourself these questions. What experience do I want the player to have? What is essential to the experience? And how can my game capture that essence? Well, you could think about this just even a day with your students. If something's going on, what do you want to do? And Chris, if you go to the next slide. And then this one is another one to really, I think number 9 is one for us to look at. Taking stock of what your game or event is truly made of. Is it using all 4 elements? What's the aesthetic? What's the technology? What's the mechanic? And what's the story? How could enhancing one of these enhance in more than one category? And reading the book, you this is pretty much the end of where we asked you to leave off at around page 118 or so. And this is where Lisa, Dawn, and Russell are really going, okay, what is our story? Yeah, what's our next part? What's the next part of this? They're working on, you know, the third realm, and what is this third? Even though they have canon, they have the mythology there, they have the narrative. It's like, what's the next step that they're going to take? And that's the part that they're looking at. They're really looking at the story. But, you know, they could just as well be looking at, how do we change the aesthetic of this game? How do we make it look differently? What key part, and they don't talk about this because they pretty much give props to Darren and say, Darren's invented the best thing ever, so we're still using the waffle engine. But what technology, what piece of technology could be added that could make it better? And what part of the mechanic could be made better? Now, think about taking this, just think about taking this lens into your students. If you are, say, at the middle school level or at the high school level, going in with just this lens, and say if you're having them develop something, whether it be on day 1 or day 2 or day 3, or even if they're doing this as a longer project, having them stop one day and go, okay, so today here's what I want you to do during this period. I want you to look at your 4 elements, and I want you to pick one where you think things could be improved the most, and either discuss it or go ahead and work on it. And depending on what level your class is, you could have them write it up individually and then go back in as a group to go ahead and do this. And that's what I'm talking about, more about us. If we're going to have kids develop games, let's do more than finger painting. Let's do more than tossing them a subject and saying anything that they create around it is just going to be wonderful. Let's, you know, if our kids want to be game designers, right? If our kids want to do this, I mean, think about it. Trish, I absolutely loved how you said, well, the kids wanted to be rock stars. You know, or they wanted to be the lead singer. Well, think about it. If you had a student who wanted to be a lead singer and you never asked them to, and you really wanted to encourage them, but you never thought that they should learn to read music.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm thinking about this. I'm looking at what you're talking about, and I'm thinking about my school because we're doing personalized learning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about a lesson that the media specialist and I just did. And even when you're designing a lesson or designing a project for your students to do, mm-hmm. all these things come into play.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking about the book learning. You're thinking about what you're trying to communicate to them. You're bringing in art. You're bringing in technology. You've got a mechanic that the lesson has to go through or the project has to go through that if you going to the game space learning kind of idea is all of these things fit together like the little cogs in the wheel. They've all got to fit together, and if you're riding on full cylinders on all those aspects, your kids can view the lesson and it will be far more engaging to them if you're hitting on all those cylinders.
And there's a lot about instructional design that could be like game design. I will tell you, there's not a lot of people out there doing that. But John Keller's ARC's motivational model for instructional design is a lot like game design because, and I mean the thing that Jesse Schell is emphasizing here is, you know, the essential event. So what is the essential event? And like I said, it could be student life. It could be, and I work in an anthropology class a lot, and the instructor is always looking in that class for what is the essential event that will convey what my students need to know for this week or even this day. So that gets us to the next one. And I think you started to even answer this, Trish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, lens 2. And Chris, after we read the question, we can definitely go back to show lens 2 again. But how would you bring this into a classroom?
All right, so for the question is, Jesse Shell writes about games and experiences. How would you take Lens 2, an essential experience, and utilize it in your classroom? If you're not a teacher, how would you see Lens 2 being implemented in a classroom? And so as a refresher, the Lens 2 is, what experiences do I want the player to have? What is essential to the experience, and how can my game capture that essence? So when it comes to classrooms, I can see this actually being a useful guide for a lesson plan, for setting up a lesson plan. What experiences do I want the students to have? Yes, that's a good thing to ask, because it also not only it would shape the way that you present information to your students. It also would shape what activities do you want to be present in that specific class that's there. So for me, I do accounting, so I like to obviously it would have to include accounting, debits and credits, unless it's a managerial class, and then it would have to be looking at typically budgets or looking at financial analysis, because that's what managerial accountants do. What is essential to the experience? Basically, the students would have to read the book before the class, so you actually know the concepts. They'd actually also have to remember previous concepts, because accounting is naturally builds on top of one another, because you have to remember your basic accounting. Every time you do accounting, you have to remember back to chapter 1, because it's all foundational knowledge. How can my class capture that essence? I've done things like I've brought games in to put them in I've brought in World of Warcraft, so that way it sort of gets the students off their normal experience. So a lot of students will get bored, or they'll be like, well, I know this because I work in the industry. And so one of the nice things I like about bringing in like a game like World of Warcraft and having them look at accounting and business in World of Warcraft is it throws them off their game, because they're like, well, wait a minute, this is a new experience. This is something new. And then they realize that, well, it doesn't matter what the experience is. The framework of accounting still works no matter what the genre, what environment or world that you're in, because business is business. Buying and selling is buying and selling. And accounting is accounting. There's always documentation of transactions. So yes, I think that this is something that can definitely be used in the class. And for me, it's something that I want the players to have a fun and entertaining experience that they actually will remember, and they'll be able to apply when they're solving problems or responding to questions.
I would, looking at this, I think to a lesson plan that the media specialist and I just started with our second graders, because one of the main things they have to study for North Carolina is understanding communities. And so what we want them to understand is that a community is made up of many different things. There's natural resources, there's mayors, there's town councils, etc. And so our goal has been to get them to understand that your community is more than the movie theater and the ice cream store. And so we've got exercises they have to do to understand who has roles in a community, and then they're going to have to understand how a community is designed, and have several of them on a team that will design their community. And then we have laid out all the kind of businesses and places that are in a community, and they need to select 5 of those, and then they're going to build those in Minecraft based upon a design that they make. And so this is doing that because it's, like I said, it's helping to understand that there's more to a community than ice cream shops and movie theaters and bowling alleys, and that there has to be streets, because you just can't walk around in the grass. That's not what we do. that they have to have places to park the cars at the buildings they're building, and that, you know, in keeping them to where they're more holistically involved in the shaping of a community, so they can get a better understanding of how it is intertwined together, and how it all has to work together to be something that the public at large can use, and how, as a mayor or a town planner, that they have to keep a lot of different things in mind in order to make a community that will be viable.
No, that's a great lesson for the kids. It really is. And it's as much system thinking as anybody who's claiming I have my students make a game. You know, that's as much systems thinking as any game. So, Chris, if you'll go on to the next one. Okay, so basically now this one this one is, I'd say we can leave this one more open-ended for other people to think about also. But considering Ingress, Hearthstone, or any other mobile game, and compare the game against the 18 lenses. This is a big essay question, so we won't try to get into all of it. But in whatever game you're playing, what are the lenses that are popping up for you?
Sure. For me, the lenses that are popping up for me that I see in a lot of the games that I play are definitely the fun ones. I really only play games that I think are fun. And the other ones is a lot of the games I play, I'm really involved heavily with the problem-solving part of the game. So I like to do a lot of the hard fun. So I like raiding in World of Warcraft, doing that endgame piece, the exploration. I'm not really an explorer. I'm not really someone who is overly curious about the world. You know, I don't go out just to see what's out there. I pretty much like to go very much let me go the fastest, most optimal way to quickly level up myself to max level to get to end game content in most of the games that I play. So that's just sort of what I am as a gamer. I like that hard fun piece to it, and I also like more of the multiplayer games where I'm working with a team and trying to help that team succeed. So those are the things that I really, really like about the games that I play. So how about you, Trish?
Well, when I saw this question, I just immediately jumped on Hearthstone just to kind of look at another one. And I'm not a hardcore Hearthstone player. I do it really for fun because I'm not trying to get ranked in world rankings in Hearthstone. I go in and play it, and I've built decks for. I'm trying to get a solid deck built for every character, so depending on my mood, I can be a paladin or I can be a warlock. But I go in and I started looking, and the reason I keep looking down is I've got my deck of lenses up right here, and I'm just I'm looking through this, and I think when I answered this on our community, it's like Hearthstone really hits it. It depending on, you know, I'm sure others would see stronger but aspects of the lenses in Hearthstone if someone's more of a hardcore player. But for me, who goes in and plays 5 or 10 hands and loses the majority of them, it really does. It's like I'm curious. I mean, it really brings out a lot of these emotions in me, as far as being surprised, because I'll be playing someone that I think is pretty equally ranked with me, but apparently they've gotten a deck and have got some serious cards along the way because they just kind of blow me up with one card. So yes, I'm surprised. The curiosity, I'm always curious to see how someone else is going to play. The emotion, oh, I go all the way from yay, I won, to I'm going to blow that, and I get, you know, yeah, and there is problem solving because you have to take your cards in the way they come, and I know that that we've talked about going through the mathematical probabilities and all that kind of stuff. my brain doesn't work that way too well. I try to build my deck to where I feel like I've got a good range of spells and powerful cards, but I also have to keep in mind I have low amounts of mana at the beginning of the game, so I have to have some powerful low-end cards. So there's all kinds of problem solving that I'm trying to work on before I even get to the game, so that I feel like I've got a viable deck that I can win. And I'm sure that if I spent nearly as much time playing Hearthstone as I play World of Warcraft, I would be further along in the rankings. But my main game is World of Warcraft because that's where I'm really challenged. But I really like how Hearthstone really seems to hit just about all of these lenses in a really nice way. And even the fact that as you're playing, if you look at the table, and you can play it on a desktop computer, you can play it on a tablet while you're sitting on the couch, you can play it on your phone while you're riding public transportation, you can play it anywhere, but there's always, it's your table that your card game is being played on. In the four corners, depending on the setting of your card table, there are like four little scenes or four little buildings or artifacts that are from World of Warcraft, like a catapult or going into a cave. And if you mouse over them or touch them on the tablet, they move or they make sounds. And so while the other person is deciding, I sit there a lot of times and just play with the little artifacts that are in the four corners, that just to see what they're going to do. It's like a lot of times something will blow up, or it'll launch a catapult, it'll throw a rock across the table, or there'll be an animal in there that will growl. I just love those four little corners of the game table that do things. That just really just entrances me. I just love it. And then at the same time, you can hear, like, you've got people watching you play, and you can hear them in the background as cards are being played. If your opponent blasts you with a big card that just knocks your health down by like 10 points, you can hear like the background people going, ooh, like this. Yeah. And you can I just like the whole atmosphere of it, and the fact that you can play it in any of your environments. You can play it in your workbench, you can play it at your hearth, or you can play it in your reading nook. It can be played anywhere. And so I just, that was the main things I thought of with that question, and it just, Hearthstone just really does do a lot of those things.
That's cool. Yeah, for me, the one that I think about, and I not just the things that I'm playing but building, is, I guess, the first one, emotion. That I really like to think about, what emotion will people have, and even though the cards have, like, the deck has the, like, fun is like the lens number 5. Fun, it's got to be a specific kind of fun, and I really like when things have hard fun in them. And I think we're getting to the end of our hour, so that we can go ahead and wrap up. So let's get to the ending. So we will be doing a Google Hangout each week for these sessions. Don't forget about Shelfie Wednesday, and I did see that some of our people did take pictures and tweet them out, which was really cool. We did have some periscopes, mainly because I had a lot of time on Wednesday, so I was at a conference and I was able just to periscope a little bit out. Don't forget that this Thursday, November 19th, this coming Thursday, at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, we are doing the Global Game Chat, which will be 30 minutes of us tweeting about games. And we'll also be having this as part of the Global Education Conference. And the Global Education Conference is happening all of next week. And so, with Sherry Jones, there will be a hangout next Wednesday at 8 a.m. Go ahead and check the Metagame Book Club for for more information. For the next reading, it'll be pages 129 to 255. And the Art of Game Design, while it says lenses 19 through 53, we will go back and look and start actually at lens 15 so that we can go ahead and look at that one a bit more. So that's about all for wrapping up. We'd like to thank everybody and keep reading your books in tandem. And thanks everyone for watching.
Bye.